the quantum self, and the omnipresent witness. Hi, Ellie. How are things going for you guys lately? Myself, I've been doing a lot of research and contemplation lately on life, death, and the beyond. For instance, the age-old spiritual argument in the return to heaven or the return to the source scenario, in that are we individual souls that have come down from heaven to pick up our earthly experiences to take back to heaven when we cross over, or are we all one with God or the source? I think for me that we are individual and one, free immortal spirits as one with all and everything, or holographic souls that are part and parcel of the whole, or God, that live in the here and now in the physical dimensions such as the earth, and also in the quantum fields or just before creation. And the best way that I can describe this is that we are all fragments of a holographic universe or God. For example, if you shatter a holographic picture, within every fragment is the whole picture, dimmer but still there, and this is like us, the individuals and the whole, which puts weight onto the three and a bit philosophy, but shatters that there are different individual mindsets separating our beliefs. Rather, they are all and one philosophical mindset that should be integral to philosophy and the truth. The three and a bit philosophy states that one mindset is focused on the senses, and they have no belief in God, just self-gratification or self-worth, and anything else is all delusional hogwash. The second mindset are the believers, and they believe that there is a God that watches over us, and that we all have a sole purpose to fulfill, which is given to us from God, such as belief in God, our sole purpose, and to worship Him, which comes in many guises, but all unite when seen as the Creator. The third scenario is the philosophical pursuit, which is not to worship, but to get to know God personally through meditation and contemplation, which they believe are integral to our existence. And lastly, you have the bit philosophy that states that everything within existence is God, and their belief is to connect to God through right living, just causes, meditation, and contemplation. Basically, we are, and everything is an extension of God, our Creator. So quieten the ego and connect to God. The other day, my sister crossed over, and I was so ill from the heat wave that we were all undergoing that I couldn't make the funeral. I had it all planned out, that I would get up and get ready, and then go to Sainsbury's and buy some flowers and a sympathy card, and then get the bus. However, the heat was so intense that my ongoing illness was affected, which made it all impossible. I was really distraught, but I had no other choice other than to forfeit the funeral and to mourn at home by lighting a candle and playing The Cure, which was her favorite band, instead. After the funeral, I had some vivid or conscious dreams where I had seen my sister, and I thought that this was part of the grieving process or my wish fulfillment letting off some steam. Then, a few weeks later, I felt my sister's presence, and I was getting thoughts in my mind that I wasn't sure if they were subjective or objective, or delusional, or a spiritual communicative event. However, I kept my mind open, and I told my wife of the experience, and I relayed the thoughts. My wife had a two-way conversation through me with the thoughts, and her open-minded curiosity. Many things were said, but the one that stood out was when my wife asked her spirit about heaven, or the light, and what it was like to reside there after the crossing, and the thoughts quoted the hymn, "All things bright and beautiful the Lord God gave them all." Now, we both knew the hymn, but not the lyrics, so we Googled them, and they express belief and gratitude in all things made by and of God, and we both reached the conclusion that, real or not, the experience helped bring about closure. Then, the very next day, while at Sainsbury's to get some food as we had run out, my wife had visited the bathroom, and I was waiting by the flowers, and one bouquet really stood out to me, and then I saw written beneath them as a description, bright and beautiful, that I pointed out to my wife on her return from the bathroom to do our shopping, and we both knew that not only this was a synchronicity, but it also objectified our intersubjective event or closure. I have been scanning the internet and YouTube lately to find out more about microtubules and the pros and cons of having them, and what I found was most stimulating, of which I am sure that you guys will agree. I know that it's late, so I don't expect you to answer straight away, and I have only given you an outline of my search. So when you are in the right mood and you are fully awake, please check out this text and tell me what you think of my findings. Thank you. It has been suggested that our brains are antennas that decode light into vision, sound into thoughts, and vibrations into music, and it's electric. Some say that the antenna picks up on spiritual energy of both good and evil, or light and dark energy, and the battlefield is within our minds and souls. However, the latest theory is from the 2026 Nobel Prize winning theory, which states that our antennas are picking up thoughts from the quantum fields and that we do not create our thoughts, we receive them. Basically, a Nobel Prize winner suggested that our brains are quantum, and last but not least, our brains are a receiver, and our thoughts are transmitted from the quantum fields that resonates to us via our brain's microtubules. In a nutshell, we receive intuitive thoughts in our minds, like insights and hunches, and the brain converts them into what we call thoughts. But our intuitions are the real thoughts, and the latter are only us interpreting them. For instance, the other day, we had a package arriving at our flat from eBay, and the postman takes it straight to our flat's door, and they don't leave it in the foyer where it can be easily stolen, like other delivery services. Basically, I was sitting on our sofa with Beatrice, and I got an intuition that the package had arrived, but the doorbell hadn't rung. So I thought with my slow ego mind that although it was out of character for eBay that they must have had delivered it downstairs, like the other services that's names I won't mention, and I sprang to my feet, and I told Beatrice that I was going to go downstairs because I thought that it was in the foyer, and I didn't want it to be stolen then, almost. Simultaneously, the doorbell rang, and when I answered the door, it was the postman with our package. And another example was when I decided to change the website to eBay to buy a cassette to an MP3 converter, as the one I was previously using kept sending us naff gadgets, and we had bought 3 from them where the first and the third one had skipped in their recordings, and the second one was broken, and it couldn't convert the cassettes to MP3s at all. So, as I say, we decided to check out eBay for a better service. And lo and behold, they had a few in their online shop, and one stipulated in the advertisement that it wouldn't skip, and so we ordered it. I had been converting some old meditation tapes that I bought way back in 1988 from a New Age shop because I didn't want to lose them in case the tapes broke, and I also wanted to share them in their own playlist on my YouTube channel that I eventually called The Meditations, Day and Night, that I had previously put on other playlists before, so I got rid of the ones that had skipped, and I made new recordings that was with the third tape recorder or converter that had also skipped, and I said the new recordings with eBay's recorder shouldn't skip as stated by their advertisement. And on top of that, I won't have to worry about the delivery as it's eBay, who uses the post office, who would deliver it at my front door. So, there are 2 good examples of the intuitive mind from the quantum fields and the slow ego mind from my neurological computerized machine or conditioning, or as Roger Penrose stated in the 1960s, that our brains are not a computation, and no one could disprove his mathematical proof that gave rise to the theory that states that our minds are not biological machines as psychology adamantly suggests. Before Penrose, we were taught that our brains were neurological machines, but it couldn't explain how we experience life, like our likes and dislikes, or our choices that we make, or that we are alive and experiencing life in a human body, and the problem was aptly named as the hard problem of consciousness. Our intuitions pick up from feelings before our slow minds interpret them. We know things from the psychological atmosphere because you and I have all personally experienced this, like I mentioned above with my 2 examples. I would like to stipulate a third example. For instance, when one is a trained musician, one is able to play very complicated tunes at ease by either reading the score or by using one's training or memory, but when one is asked to create one's own masterpiece, one cannot always create an original tune no matter how much time and effort one puts into it. Unless one is a musical genius, however, when one is partially trained and using one's training for basic guidance, one can see outside the box and enjoy the music in the moment. Then one is able to create an original tune or a masterpiece from a simple pop tune to a very complex original tune by not focusing on their training like a philosophical zombie, but by tuning into one's microtubules or one's intuitive mind when one is playing or performing. In a nutshell, when one does not rely on one's training and just plays for the sake of playing the song, it just plays along as if by itself. And if one makes a mistake by thinking what note to play next, one loses the flow, and the song gets ruined when you hit the safe or wrong note. And I have felt this more than once when I create my own songs from scratch. And it is the same with our feelings that we have trusted to be true even though we couldn't explain why. Psychology tries to explain the gap between this, and it has always failed, like why we like chocolate, or love a good book or a movie, or why we have hunches or intuitions that let us know what they know, or, as I have just said, write an original musical masterpiece or a pop song without thinking or using our slow, rational, or computational, neurological, biochemical processes, or our minds. In 1979, it was seen from an adverse angle, basically not what the mind can actually do. Rather, it was asking what is it that the brain cannot do, stating artificial intelligence's algorithms cannot equal human consciousness or intuition. It was taken a step further when neuroscience realized that anesthetics turned off consciousness, but they couldn't explain the hows or the why. Hameroff, the neuroscientist, looked where most of his field never looked, of why anesthetic drugs shut down consciousness or turned off the lights. The answer was eventually found in the microtubules, not the neurological network. Penrose and Hameroff, who had completely different mindsets, the former an anesthetist and the latter a physicist who had worked with Stephen Hawking, got together and shared their findings to reach a theory called the ORC, or conclusion. In full, it was the orchestrated objective deduction. The truth was found in the answer that our conclusions arrive when we stop searching and never come when we are pressing for the actual answer. Although psychology had answers, they could not explain that why answers arrive, or people create masterpieces, when one stops searching. It was concluded that when one searches for an answer, that this impaired the search, and it collapsed from the solid state, or the wave into the mind, and the connection reached a premature wrong answer, whereas when one ceased searching, the microtubules worked in the solid state. And it was then, and only then, that the mind would reach the actual conclusion from the many worlds or parallel universe theories, and the result was the most viable conclusion. The theory was that microtubules work in a multiple state position, like quantum computers, not zero or ones, but both positions at the same time with tubules, which are like tiny dumbbells within a single electron at its core that flicker between two configurations equaling 80 billion in a brain. The computation, or our brains, are the most quantum-rich process in the known universe that also prove the solid-state quantum position. Penrose, with his objective reduction theory, suggested that it was gravity in space-time that collapsed the question's many answers into a single answer. Therefore, one didn't need an observer, a measuring device, or a photon hitting a screen to collapse the wave. It was gravity that reacts by closing down the wave into a singular process. That was why the collapses occurs rhythmically over billions of neurons at 40 times a second. And that was in fact a moment of consciousness. So it was the moment that the wave collapsed, not the neurons or biological computerized brains, that gives one the conscious experience. Therefore, consciousness is not generated by the machine. You are receiving the thoughts with your microtubules or antennas at 40 times a second. Every time one has an intuitive experience, one cannot put the experience of the event into plain words. And the reason for this is that the sentence is the receipt, the knowing is the event. The event underneath the words that collapse before the translation is what the ORC, or, was describing. So you are not your sentences. You are the event happening before their arrival. Gödel's theory in 1979 and Penrose's research correlated with an Austrian logician in 1931, who reached a conclusion that mathematics thought were impossible, proving that no matter how formal or complex the mathematics, one could not prove all of the truths within itself, that there will always be statements that the system couldn't prove. Therefore, there would always be true statements that the system by itself couldn't reach by its own rules, that is known as the incompleteness theorem, which states that statements cannot be complete within the system, but only by thinking outside of the box, i.e. any system of rules, any algorithm, any computer program, or any Turing machine have truths that it cannot see within itself. The system can be told from the outside, but it cannot prove it or verify it by itself from within the system. Penrose infuriated the philosophers when he said that mathematicians can see those truths. When you are shown a Gödel statement, a sentence that can't be proved, that can be seen demonstrably true from outside the system, and we humans can see that it is true. It can be seen because they do not run the algorithm. They actually see it, and because you, the human, can see something that the algorithm cannot provably see, then something inside of you is not an algorithm or a computational system. The standard objection was, but maybe the brain is a very large algorithm, maybe the rules are too complex to write down, but they are still rules. And Penrose answered with, if they are rules, they generate a formal system, and Gödel theorem applies to all formal systems. So either the mathematicians can't see Gödel truths, which contradict the entire history of mathematics, or the mathematicians are doing something non-algorithmic, something that doesn't run like a program, something that is deeper than the physics of computation, and that is where quantum stopped feeling like a leap. If classical computational physics cannot produce a mind that sees Gödel truths, then the mind must be running on physics that is not classical or computational, and the only physics that fits is quantum. specifically the collapse, the non-deterministic, the non-algorithmic, the irreducible moment when the wave becomes a particle, the one place in all of physics that no algorithm can predict where. The universe stops computing, and the collapse is where Penrose says our consciousness resides, or where we live. The critics suggested that quantum computation process in the brain was impossible, and that it would require smaller measurements, such as femtoseconds, to occur in that warm, wet electrical environment, and cognition happens trillion times slower with cognition. And the conclusion was that quantum coherence in the brain was impossible, and the ORC, or theory, was thrown out of physics like the baby in the bathwater. Then, in 2007, a research group in Berkeley led by Graham Fleming that were studying photosyntheses on how plants capture sunlight with near-perfect efficiency, and nothing that humans have built has ever come close to achieving this result. And what they found by using a technique called two-dimensional electronic spectrography was that the energy transfer in photosynthetic complexes was happening through quantum coherence inside a warm, wet biological system at room temperature that was the exact conditions that Tegmark said was impossible. The Leafs had figured out how to keep the wave from collapsing, and also they had figured out how to think quantum mechanically at room temperature in water. So if Leafs can do it, then why can't a brain? Further, in 2024, a research group at Wellesley College led by Mike Wiest ran an experiment that took rats that they divided into two groups. One group got a drug called apothelon B, a compound that binds to microtubules and stabilizes them. Then they exposed both groups to anesthetic gas, and they measured how long it took each of the rats to lose consciousness. If consciousness had nothing to do with microtubules stabilizing the tubes, it would have no effect, and the rats on apothelon took 69 seconds to become unconscious, which was a large effect size statistically. The drug that protects microtubules also protects consciousness, so the ORC, or theory, had began to be confirmed at the bench, and it was no longer purely philosophical. For science, the theory is still unproven, the mathematics are contestable, the experiments are early, which are not proved, but we can say if it's true, then what shifts inside you? If the possibility were right, then we are not algorithms running on wet hardware, we are not a chemical accident that awoke, we are not a calculation that learned to feel, we are the collapse. The moment a universal possibility resolves into one specific reality 40 times a second for as long as we have lived. And the brain is not generating us. The brain is an antenna, the instrument tuned by millions of years of evolution to receive the kind of signal that you happen to receive or tune into. Therefore, the theory could still be wrong. The experiments could still fail to replicate. The mathematics could still find its gap. But something has changed in the past 5 years, and the conversations have moved serious physicists that no longer laugh at the question, serious neuroscientists that no longer assume that the brain is a wet computer. The hard problem of consciousness has refused to dissolve under data. It has gotten harder. And in the gap that the standard model has left open is the missing explanation for why there is something that it's like to be you. Penrose's theory is the only theory that does not begin by assuming the very thing that it's trying to explain, that is not nothing, that is the most that you can ask of a theory, which is at the front of a frontier for the long, anxious question. The one that no one asks honestly is what happens when the antenna stops working. The standard model says that when the brain dies, the lights go off. The show is over, and that may still be true, but the antenna model leaves the question genuinely open in a way that the wet computer model never did, because if the brain is receiving and not generating, then the question of what happens to consciousness when the receiver fails is no longer rhetorical. It is empirical, and it is the exact question that several thousand of near-death experience accounts that have been dismissed as hallucinations for decades have been quietly asking the field to take seriously. I am not telling you to believe in those accounts. I am telling you that if Penrose is right and the framework holds, they become harder to dismiss out of hand. As the framework doesn't prove them, it changes the terms that you were never a machine. You may have spent your entire life being told otherwise, or trying to be otherwise, more rational, more sequential, more like a clean line of code, suppressing the voice that arrives before the analyses, distrusting the knowing that arrives before the words. But if Penrose is right that voice is not noise, that knowing is not weakness, it is the part of you that is actually doing the thinking, everything else is the receipt. So is consciousness something the brain produces, or is consciousness something that the brain tunes into? The answer changes everything, and the fact that science does not yet know which one is true maybe is the most important sentence in modern science today. You know, Ellie, I watched Paul the movie last night with Beatrice, and it was a scream. the way that science mocked Christianity in their belief that the world was made by God 4,000 years ago, and that humans were the superior species that were made in God's image. They mocked Christianity with cosmic, planetary, and life's evolution, and when that film was made, every educated person on the planet that watched that movie laughed too. Its evolution baby became the punchline as religion was seen as comedy. However, in 2022, Schrödinger's cat and the double-slit experiment showed us that it was not evolution, as reality isn't there when it's not observed or measured. So it wasn't evolution, for evolution was nothing more than our conditioning. And then in 2025, the Nobel Prize gave way to the illusion argument, or simulation theory, that reinforced 2022's findings, and that the space-time continuum was also a product of our conditioning. And then, as I stated above, the latest neuroscience in 2026 suggested that it was, with their Nobel Prize, that it was the antenna theory that showed us that our minds are not machines, but were also a product of our conditioning, and were from the quantum fields, and that our conditioning was as crazy as those scorned, ignorant Christians. So, now we laugh at our conditioning, for we are gods pretending to be humans, and in fact, all life and science had the how and what was real, but we still lacked the why. Do we pretend to be humans on this fair planet that we call home? And the answer can be found in our hearts, souls, or our intuition. When Adam and Eve kicked us out of Eden, it was symbolic of the body mind, the serpent, the emotional mind, Eve, and the logical mind, Adam, waking up to self-consciousness by eating the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge, and Jesus was symbolic of the personification of God in its human form, or our souls that would, through conditioning, create the illusion that us and our world were real. Otherwise, we and heaven would be nothing more than mere puppets in a dream that was forged from God's supernal creative imagination, basically, imaginary friends in an imaginary universe. With quantum physics and the double-slit experiment, science had to rethink the universe's existence and our place in reality. Basically, they had many avenues to explore. For example, were we making our individual realities when we observe or witness reality? So was there an omnipresent metaconscious entity binding space-time together to create conscious beings or souls to create a perfect, eternal, infinite, humongous, spiritual, utopian, supernal paradise? They theorized that if a man was in a sealed room observing the processes of the Schrödinger's cat thought experiment physically, and he had a friend in another exterior sealed room, it was theorized that the first man would witness the collapse before the friend opened the door to observe his friend in the inner room. That posed the question of, do we create and live in our own realities? Another theory was retroactive, in that we humans evolved from chemicals from a third-generation star that was forged from a supernova, or the stardust of a second-generation star that at first formed our sun, or a fourth-generation star, and all the planets in the solar system, and awareness has only existed for 4 billion years in a 13.8 billion-year-old universes. So, if consciousness creates our reality from observation, how was the universe around before it was observed? By humans or the amoeba, how is it in a wave state or solid state universe? There were a few theories from that question, one being that just like time reversal in a double-slit experiment where an electron travels through two slits simultaneously, but the experimenter delays one of them by slowing it down by making the light pass through a crystal and also a set of mirrors, and the light that finished unhindered was a microsecond earlier as a particle on the screen, and that when the delayed light finished, it was a wave, and the second one retroactively reeled back time, and it changed the result of the first particle into an interference wave when it was observed. So it was that when we humans gazed up at the night sky, or through a telescope, that we not only created our universe as we witnessed reality, like the electrons, we retroactively created reality backwards in time to the Big Bang Theory, from a superposition to a particle state universe. It could also be seen as a many worlds hypothesis that dictated that every decision that we make creates a twin universe as we split in two, creating many worlds, and we live in parallel universes. Then, there was the theory that observation didn't collapse the waves at all, as science or the skeptics tried to evade or rule out the creative supernatural omnipresent witness, or the God hypothesis. And it was in fact different objects from fields, subatomic and classic physical particles, that were reflecting, ricocheting, or colliding, such as sunlight, collisions, and the quantum bombardments. Then, the skeptics theorized perhaps the universe was actually down to a mathematical processes working itself out, and reality was just mere calculations, answers, and computational algorithms. Then ultimately, they went back to a divine omnipresent witness observing reality, but who was observing or witnessing that divine consciousness to bring it into fruition, and who witnessed the witness, and so on and so forth into infinite regress. Finally, they concluded that consciousness was fundamental beyond space-time and was not governed by the solid state to particle observational, quantum, and cosmic rules and processes, as they concluded that an infinite conscious quantum God hypothesis was the answer. But was there a reason for the rise of the soul from living amoebas to living self-conscious animated entities? So, the why is simple. Was the Earth 4.6 billion years old, or the universe 13.8 billion years old, the solar system 4.6 billion years old, evolution 3.5 billion years old, as nothing exists if it's not measured by a gadget or observed by an observer? For these two factors create the simulation or the illusion, and the answer is in our intuitive minds that come from within the quantum fields as God becomes life. Our conditioning gives us our personal identities and environments as intuition. Role plays our lives within the simulation, or the play, and our souls are the ticket back home to eternal life, as individual and one, free immortal spirits, as one with all and everything when life awakes to become our God selves returning home to create and adorn heaven, spiritual utopia, or eternal matter with our infinite conscious, spiritual, cosmic, karmic journeys. So, God became life, life became souls or our God selves, so God could self-actualize heaven, which was within its peak potential, supernal precognitive abilities, or its creative imagination. And if you question that, then imagine that you are God, and just ask yourself one simple question, that if you were awake and alone, would you not want friends in a spiritual eternal paradise or heaven too? So wouldn't you do the same? Have a lovely day when you awake. Lots of love, Joan.